The sun, the life force of our solar system. Its photons of energy can remain trapped in the sun's sphere for 100,000 years. And when finally they are released, it will take the photons 8 minutes to travel from the surface of the sun to the surface of a leaf on planet Earth. A leaf is a marvel of evolution. It transforms the photons into food for planet Earth, creating a foundation for all life. And it begins with a tree. It's time to look again at that tree outside your door. And to the forest beyond. What do you know about trees and forests?
When you come into the forest like this, the first thing that hits you is the smell of the earth, the smell of the humus in the earth, the smell of the decaying twigs, the smell, that wonderful smell that rises up to you and meets you.
We all feel better when we're around trees and when we walk in the forest. But why? For over 1,000 years, the Japanese have been coming to their forests to do what they call forest bathing. From school children to businessmen, they all come here to forest bathe.
Forest bathing is really about immersing yourself in the bath of medicinal aerosols that make up the forest atmosphere. And the benefits are many.
I'm on the top, no, halfway up Mount Kurama. I'm joining, it seems to me to be the rest of the Japanese population today on this wonderful day in fall, forest bathing.
If you feel refreshed and invigorated after a walk in the forest, there is a chemical explanation.
A tree is not just a tree. Some of the most complex chemistry that is found on the planet is produced in the furnace of a tree.
One of the most important trees at the Shinto shrine is the sacred sugi tree.
And for those who speak Latin, it's Cryptomeria japonica, the sacred tree of the Shinto shrines.
The sugi and many of these trees around me are indeed very powerful in the work they do with this molecular screening of chemical aerosols into the atmosphere. These aerosols directly benefit your immune system. Trees create many of the chemicals used in the manufacture of approximately 60% of our medicines, from aspirin and caffeine to paclitaxel in the treatment of breast cancers. And trees continue to be rich banks of biochemical possibilities. These trees also have life living within the tree itself. It's a fungal life form, and they are called endogenous fungi. These endogenous fungi are very clever.
They produce extraordinary compounds, and the compounds they produce are very unique.
These previously unknown compounds are the source of many new exciting medicines.
But you're coming in here today to get it for free. And that's part of forest bathing.
Everyone benefits.
Trees are the secret to our existence because they rule this planet on every physical plane: the land, the sea, and the air. So much of our world is invisible to us, such as all of the chemicals that are the building blocks of a healthy, balanced, and breathing world.
And of course, the trees are a key player in this manufacturing and distribution of these chemicals.
This spruce tree, it's an Engelmann spruce. It's an ancient, ancient tree. And it has a fiery canopy of all kinds of chemicals in it. This tree produces a whole treasury of aerosols. The aerosols are alpha-pinene and beta-pinene. Then in the air there is boronal acetate. In the air there's a form of camphor compound. Liberated with that is a limonene compound which aerates itself, firing up into the atmosphere like the parasols of a dandelion.
It is an applicator chemical, an aerosol.
So all of those chemicals, those pinenes, are now in my lungs.
The limonene produced by these trees is used in chemotherapy.
Limonene is anti-cancer compound. The pinenes are antibiotic compounds. And what they are doing to me now is they're giving me a slightly narcotic reaction. They have an anesthetic reaction on my brain and in my myelin sheaths, in all the message areas of my body, just messages, just like a computer system. And what that is telling me is to relax.
As my immune system is being boosted.
Cities everywhere need trees. To bring in birds, to clean the air of airborne pollution, and to soften the concrete experience.
でご存知のように、今日のような何でもない日でも1200万人が住んでいる東京アーバンデザート、都市砂漠の中で唯一残されているその時の モデルとして明治神宮の森、都市砂漠の中で唯一残されている緑のコアとして中心としてある明治神宮にこれだけ多くの人が来ている。これはやはり日本人が人類が本能的に森に対してのやはり神様を日本人はあるいは仏様を崇敬するか。
One man who has given this much thought and is getting his hands in the dirt is Professor Akira Miyawaki. He has spent 50 years traveling the globe, planting and restoring native species forest systems. He's turned his attention to Tokyo, the city he calls home. Professor Miyawaki searches for every nook and cranny in Tokyo to fill with native trees, the big, small, and tiny, creating what he calls the world's smallest forests.
This is a perfect example of a city forest.
Yes, yes, very important thing.
City forest.
Yeah,
And it's
Yes.
the smallest forest in Tokyo.
幅2メーター、1メーター、2メーター、あるいは80センチでもできる、こういう森の具体的な実証です。本当、オールピープルというのはみんなで一緒にこう植えたわけ。本当に小さな苗木で今こうなって、さらにこれ大きくなります。航空写真で見ると、みんなセメントばっかしなんです。じゃあどこで植えるか。学校があるじゃないかと。31の小中学校でグラウンドの周りなんかで当時市民は落ち葉が落ちるとかあるいは植えとかないのにとかだいぶ反対があった。で区長と一緒に説得しまして1万本植物園31の小中学校でありました。エバグリンオークやあるいはタブノキやシイノキ、ナウソウズロビオリのオークですが、幸い日本はエバグリンオーク、プレックス、あるいはカスタニア、カスタノキス、スキダータ、あるいはプラルスペース、ミックス&デンスリープランティング、and competition, patience and together to grow. High tree layer, sub-high tree layer, shrub layer, and under herb layer. で、この見えないこの中には何十万という微生物、カビやパンジー、あるいはバクテリアがいるわけ。こういう匂いがするのが豊かな森のこのサーキュレーション、巡回システムの基本ができているということですね。エバグリンオークやあるいはタブノキやシイノキ、その森は 0.06% 残ってない。私の世界38カ国を北はシベリアの大河から南はサウスイーストエイジア、東南アジアのボルネオムのあるいはアフリカのコンゴも、そしてサウスアメリカのブラジル、アマゾンも全くと言ってほどない、ほとんどマンメイド、人間に作られた、あるいは人間に破壊された後のファーストグローズのパイオニアであることが分かりました。もう議論だけは終わった。そして今までの科学技術、マネーが一番最高の時代がむしろ終わったんで、ふるさとの企業、ふるさとの森をたとえ小さなところのアーバンエリアから、そしてランドスケープまでのエリアまでやはり作っていかなきゃできるとこから。アーバンフォレストと都市の森、これが一番大事であって、私たちの生活の基盤になるのをこうしている。
そう이건 없었는데 없으니까 이거 안 나가는 게外側だけ見るけどまさかこうやって見てなかった消し分け消し分けよかった今日は見といてね消し分け消し分けしないすごいねこれがボコンと
When you're in the garden and you're looking at a cherry tree and you see a Baltimore oriole coming into the cherry tree, or even a cardinal, or even a scarlet tanager, you have the garden not because of you, and you know you've built the garden for the bird, and it gives you a feeling of completeness, that in the whole world there is gratitude to you that you have a garden and that you're honoured that these birds will come and visit you, and that you've built a habitat for the birds and you have maintained and protected the habitats for these birds and the animals and the snakes and the creatures around you. And by gosh, it gives you a really good feeling of well-being and joy. So what you're doing with the bioplan is you're working with nature, and then when you have a good healthy nature around you, you actually have your health.
In the countryside around her farm in Ontario, Canada, Diana Beresford Kroger noticed many tree species disappearing. She made the decision to preserve and protect them. For over 40 years now, she has devoted her life to collecting, trialing, breeding, and studying rare North American tree species to survive climate change, building a living library to ensure biodiversity, food, and medicines. As she did, she realized this has to happen all over the globe, wherever the native forests are falling before human need and greed.
This led me to the outlandish notion that we must replant the global forest, our cheapest and best defense against climate change.
In my own way, I began replanting the global forests long ago. I planted this black walnut as a seedling here on my farm almost 30 years ago now. 'Tis a tree that really grows in all of eastern Canada and down into the States along the Mississippi.
It's really an extraordinary state of affairs where everything around this tree benefits from it. It is really a medicinal tree, and it produces a fruit. The fruit is a nut, and the nut is here. The nut is like a globe, really, isn't it? The protein of these nut meats is as good as any beef on the market. Then these nuts have got minerals, all kinds of unusual minerals. But they have got something else, 3 items that are very, very scarce in our food nowadays. The flesh of this nut has oleic, linoleic, and linolenic acid in them.
These are the 3 essential fatty acids for the development and repair of the brain.
The functioning of transportation all through the body for neural messages, because these acids, these fatty acids, protect the myelin sheath of the human body and of the animals, and what you should have is maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of them a day. And also, once upon a time, these were part of the great savanna of North America.
A long time ago, in the Middle Ages, and way stretching before that in thousands of years, this heart of America could do something remarkable with the forests. Out of this soil, the plasticity of green grew to produce forests beyond your thinking, beyond the dimensions of your home. Enormous canopies of forest that carried butternuts, walnuts, hickory nuts, chestnuts, and marvelous oak trees in great canopy systems which were called savannas, and they stretched hundreds of miles, sucking up the Mississippi River with this marvelous green highway that the squirrels could walk hundreds of miles without touching the ground. And that green highway was there stretching the continent.
From the Gulf of Mexico to north of the Ottawa River, and from the Atlantic coast to west of the Mississippi. Today, the remnants of these virgin hardwood forests are minuscule. And there are no wild stands of black walnut remaining on record in the United States. This North American sister of the Japanese sugi, the American redwood, is one of the world's most loved trees. And for good reason. Its sheer size makes it so memorable and inspiring. It's the largest carbon-bearing living organism on Earth.
For an Irish woman, this place is haunted. It's haunted by silence and a certain quality of mercy. The trees are enormous. They're called sequoias, evergreen sequoias, Sequoia sempervirens, which is the redwood. The redwood is the tallest tree, the tallest conifer on the planet. It will go up to maybe 40 stories. It will soar right up into the sky. Chief Sequoia called them the kings of the forest, and they are indeed the kings of the conifer forest. But this is a very, very unusual place in all of the planet.
While I was working with redwoods as a research species, I have to tell you, it's a pretty easy tree to fall in love with. We haven't really started to figure out yet what's going on in trees, and particularly what's going on underground. I mean, we stand here and look at these things, and above ground is awesome. We still don't know how water gets to the top.
A few weeks ago, I was sitting at my kitchen table, and I was thinking about the volume of a 2,000-year-old redwood. I decided that I would, in my mind, create a scale. And I would put a 2,000-year-old redwood on one side of the scale, and what would balance out that scale? And it would be a whole town. And the town would be, I figured out the volume of about 13,000 people. And that boggled my mind. And then I got the idea of the volume of these trees. It's just immense.
if you look at the rings on this tree are very small because there's so much diameter and there's so much height that the year's growth is being put on a whole lot of very small places. But when you add it up, a big tree like this is growing faster now than it has ever time in its life. They don't slow down.
We're standing on soil containing insects, bacteriophages, fungal hyphae, viruses, bacteria, and even algae. And there's so much more. And we don't even fully understand living soil, let alone the roots, let alone the interconnections. It's like a huge metro system underneath our feet. These redwoods that remain with us are really the runts. The straightest, biggest, oldest trees are always the first to be logged. By the 1870s, most of the remarkably big redwoods were already taken for lumber. These were the mother trees, 2,000 to 4,000-year-old trees. We now know that these really big trees, the mother trees, in any forest system essentially nurse all of the forest around them by way of carbon and nutrient transfers through the underground network of root and soil. And when these dominant trees are removed from a forest, the integrity, health, and the quality of a forest is significantly diminished.
They really are a coastal species, aren't they?
Well, the coast redwoods is coastal species, but when you talk about all of the species of the redwoods, we have giant sequoia, which is a montane species, grows at elevations between about 1,500 and 3,000 meters.
Before the last ice age, the various redwood species grew across the entire northern landscape of planet Earth. After the last ice age, we were down to some 2 million acres of redwoods, mostly in California. And now, with the present and ongoing chainsaw cycle, we are down to about 133,000 acres.
The redwood forests of North America stretch from the Choctaw River up in Oregon down to the Monterey Peninsula and a little bit closer maybe to San Francisco. Think of these redwoods as a whole series of tall green curtains stretching up and down the coast. A green wall on the lower area and a green wall on the mountainous area. That green wall is connected to the atmosphere and in turn is connected to the great ocean of the Pacific in a rather extraordinary way.
In the morning here in California, the mist rises in from the sea, and it is actually drawn in from the sea by the heat of the land. But these green curtains trap that mist.
These trees are acting as condenser units or green machines for the collection and preservation of water. They're pulling the moisture up from the aquifer, but they're replenishing the aquifer again and again by condensation of fresh potable water from the ocean mist. In the past, the redwoods provided this service here for the West Coast.
California is very dry, and it is getting drier. And as these trees come down, it's getting drier and drier again.
These redwood forests need to come back.
Along the coast, the trees are part of a chain or a cycle, a feeding cycle which feeds everything, all the way to the underwater forests.
These underwater forests of kelp oxygenate the oceans, as the trees do the atmosphere. What we do see of this invisible forest is the upper canopy of its reproduction, floating with balloons called vesicles that are filled with mucilage and air. Below the surface, this kelp forest is held in place by a root system called a holdfast, anchoring it to the ocean floor. Amazingly, the kelp grows as much as 1.5 feet a day. But those kelp depend on the trees here.
And when the trees are growing and producing leachate, the leachate comes right down into the water here, and the leachate carries iron in the water. Then they can grow and get big and get huge and then divide. So it's without those trees, there would be no leachate. Without the leachate,
There would be no kelp, and without the kelp, there would be no otters. No coastal marine life. Not even the whales.
It's another of the chain of relationships found throughout nature that can be so invisible to us. Until that chain is broken. A strange desert was created in Japan more than a century ago. It happened on the Rimo Peninsula on the northern island of Hokkaido. Japanese settlers clear-cut the native forests to create farmland. But with the trees gone, the rich humus layer created by the forest was gradually blown away by the constant high winds. The land became a barren desert. That desert extended itself into the sea. Along thousands of kilometers of coastline, the marine ecosystem collapsed entirely. It was a mystery to everyone.
Professor Katsuhiko Matsunaga solved this mystery. It all begins with a molecule of iron. Iron is the foundation of the marine food chain.
でその鉄を光合成生物は直接利用できません。でしたがってその鉄をどのような形の鉄を光合成生物が摂取しているか、これに興味を持ったんですね。でそこでいろいろ研究を始めますとですね、でその古子さんは人間の手に相当するものを持っていて、そして鉄をこう捕まえるんですね。森林で作られる腐食物質で、この中にですね、腐食物質の中にフルゴ酸というのがあるんですね。これは腐食物質の一つですけどね。で窒素とかリン、ケイ素、これがないと生育できません。でこれを栄養塩とニュートレントと呼んでますけども、これはその山の森林の腐食土で作られたそういった窒素、リン、ケイ素、これが雨とともに河川を通して小川を通して、そして海に運ばれていくということで、いや森がないと我々はこの海からですね、魚とか魚介類を得ることができません。その結果、最近では漁民の森といいましてですね、漁師の方が中心となって日本全国で植林をする、そういった輪が広がってきたんですね。 のバックボーンとなっているのが私の研究だというふうに思いますから、長年研究をやってきたそのような苦労しましたけども、その甲斐があったというふうに思っております。
You found something that was so simple and yet so valid for everything all over the world.
この関係をやはり全ての全世界の人々が理解してもらうと、そうするとより良い海に変わるんじゃないかというふうに思いますね。森林もそれから海もですね、こうつながっているということですね。
Now we know the oceans feel the effect of a forest clear-cut hundreds of miles away. Maybe this is why the Japanese have come to say, seek a fish by climbing a tree. This is rainforest that predates the last ice age. Only 5% of this ancient coastal rainforest remains.
Along the Wild Pacific Trail, I came upon this great western red cedar. It measures over 54 feet in circumference and is over 1,000 years old.
But as with all trees, so much more is going on here. The DNA in each cell of all trees codes the tree to produce protein.
And it produces all of the manufacturing needed for its health, just like you and me.
In this ancient red cedar and all other trees, they are not far off you and me in their capacity to live, but they have lived for a very, very long period of time.
This is a phenomenal species. It is something worth studying. It is something definitely worth knowing. And in my opinion, as a botanist, it is a miracle of this planet.
In the 1960s, this whole watershed was logged. In fact, 90% of the watershed was logged. And at that time, no protection was afforded to creeks and rivers and streams. So they actually logged right up to the creek banks and then threw the waste wood into the stream. It was littered with logging debris, small branches to large cedar logs, and piled up. So debris jams that were blocking fish access upstream and were blocking water flow downstream. By opening it up, but retaining lots of the wood in the stream still, we're sort of restoring it back to a functioning habitat.
Now, can I make a comment about you? You're just a little woman. And how did you manage to get these huge logs around here back up to... What did you do?
It's really hard work, but we use sort of hand-powered mechanical winches and cables and pulley systems, and we sort of just pull the logs back, opening the stream up, and then sort of anchor them against the bank of the creek.
To my eyes as a botanist, you've got the alders, in excellent condition. Then you've got the lower shrubs that will feed the butterflies and the birds, and then going down into the gravel, you've got open the whole area, and you've got the stream running over gravel, which means the water is being oxygenated. And from your alders, then you have got lots and lots of really good lichens.
And these are lichens on lichens producing ursolic acid, which sweeps the water clean in front of the salmon coming up here.
If they can do it with a very small baby in arms, if you can do it, I can do it. If she can do it, we can do it. And actually we can all do it. Because there's lots of us around.
I was born next to the sea. My heartbeat is part of the ancient conversation between the forests and the oceans. The tides are in the trees, in the atmosphere, and in the aquifers. These are the bare-bone, skeletal elements of our lives.
Like so many people from around the globe, the Irish were a woodland culture. And now, as with so many of those cultures, their native forests have come down. Across Ireland, atop these hills, are where the Irish oak forests once stood. But no more.
I look around me, there are no oak forests left. There should be oak forests here. What happened to make all of these forests go? It's a whole series of disasters that had happened on this island.
Many a result of the 500 years of invasion and occupation by England. The saying went at the time that the Irish will never be tamed while there are leaves on the trees. And so Ireland was left with less than 1% forest cover. Trees and forests are often the casualty of wars, occupation, and conquest.
It's hard to believe that 2,000 years ago, this island had a protection, stronger protection for its trees than it has today. The Irish, who are a woodland people, lost the context for their culture,
Yes.
which is these forests. The section of Brehon law known as the Breha Comai Kessa, which is the laws of neighbourhood,
Yeah.
and the resources of the forest belong to every person on the condition that they took what they needed, no more, no less. With the abundance of forest that we had, for a long time, 65, 70, 75% forest cover, there was enough for everybody. The Brehon law was written before the Magna Carta, before 1215 or 1216.
Yeah. Yeah.
That Brehon law was written centuries beforehand and practiced centuries even before that. This law system came from the forest, from the observation of how the forest is a almost perfect society in how it arranges itself, from the very biggest to the smallest, all have a place and all are working together in a harmony. It was about people living very close to nature, almost in a dreamlike state, where they saw the plants, the trees, the stones, the water. It was all alive, and they could communicate with all of these, that there were spirits in all of these things.
In Ireland, these forests of native species are so rare. This is only one of a few, and it is a small forest, barely 60 acres. It seems really as though it has survived only by chance. I know this forest because close by there is a very important tree, and it has a name.
The tree behind me is probably my most favourite tree in the world. It's the tree that sits in my landscape, in the landscape of my mind when I'm living in Canada. And it stays there in my mind because it has a conversation with me all the time. This tree has borne witness to the landscape of Ireland for 1,000 years and maybe even more. It is the Quercus robur. It is the darling of the Celtic world. This woodland was a favourite of our last orderee, and that was the High King of Ireland, and that man's name was Brian Boru. The Druids that were at his side told him and advised him about these trees.
The Druids of ancient Ireland are often misunderstood. They were the elite educated class of this woodland culture. They served as spiritual leaders, lawyers, doctors, poets, composers, musicians, and astronomers. They had an extraordinary ability to observe nature. The oak, Andar, was sacred to the Druids. It remains at the heart of many Irish legends. The oak could communicate with the heavens through lightning.
300 years to be born, 300 years to live, and 300 years to die, which is the history of an oak, almost 1,000 years. When the tree gets to be that ancient, it has a great weight on the canopy. And when the wind comes on the canopy, it has a torque value on the trunk itself. And the torque value is like winding the top of a bottle of a jam jar. It tightens down on the trunk itself. And what that produces from the bark is something really interesting. It's a gallotannin produced down at the end of the tree. It pours out like a form of molasses. And it was called Ishgadov on Ishgadov by the Druids. The black water. The healing black water. The tannic acid has also a hypertensive action on the skin. And if you've got bleeding on the skin, it sears it, closes up the wound, and it's like you just had surgery. That's what the Druids had in ancient Ireland. Medicine came from here. Medicines still do come from nature, from trees. We've just forgotten.
The Celts heard the song of nature, the song of the power of nature. And they heard it through the trees. That forest song was transcribed into an alphabet called the Ogham script.
I'm sitting in front of the newspaper of the Druids. The newspaper of about 2,000 years old, possibly the largest newspaper in all of Ireland.
Hundreds of these ancient stone newspapers survive, most of them in Southern Ireland. This is one of the tallest.
I would come along here 2,000 years ago and I'd know the news of the day. I'd know who had conquered who. How many cows did somebody have? Who married who? I'd find it on the stone.
It is one of the oldest scripts of Europe.
It is an alphabet based on trees. One tree is the Scots pine. The Romans had a name for it, Pinus sylvestris, of course, but the Irish had their name for it, and the name is an alm, the sacred tree, an willa of the Druids. The birch tree, birch is called an ve in this language, and it goes on like that. The oak tree, the sacred tree of the Celts, is the script of D, Ondar, similar to Daru of Sanskrit. So it goes right down the whole of the alphabet. An bhuile in Old Gaelic are sacred trees, and sacred trees were the sacred trees of the Ogham script. Each one of them was a sacred species. But that's nothing new, because sacred trees are found in North America. They are the trees without chlorophyll in them. They're the blonde trees, the trees that are called alba trees.
In the global garden, some trees are treated as being special. A deep reverence has emblazoned their image on the landscape since the beginning of human history. And across the world, there were trees of water. They were called the water fir, or dawn redwood, in the sacred temples of China. The Cryptomeria japonica, the great sugi trees of Japan. Found around the Shinto shrines where the trees still hold sacred significance.
These are ancient species, but there's always medicine at the back of it. There's always a reason why these trees were called sacred.
And in Ireland, it was certain ancient families that kept this knowledge alive.
My family elders passed this knowledge of the trees to me.
I grew up here. I was brought in here when my family died.
According to Brehon thinking, an orphan is everybody's child. So everybody who lived here, the high and the low, felt they had a responsibility to tutor me.
They taught me all the old laws, the old cures, the fishoggeries, the thinking for remedies, for medicines.
All of the laws of the Druids, the laws of the trees. An understanding of nature was passed to me, a sacred trust. This was my apprenticeship in nature. I worked as a scientist where I had developed a non-typing blood substitute, an artificial blood, and found that there was a similarity in the chemistry of plants and the human being. The hemoglobin of blood and the green chlorophyll of plants are remarkably similar in form and function. The science spoke to the sacred in me, creating a synthesis for my philosophy of nature.
E.O. Wilson, Harvard entomologist and considered the father of modern environmentalism, calls Diana's ideas a rare, entirely new approach to natural history. That revolutionary approach led to her series of groundbreaking books about trees and forest systems. Arboretum America, our philosophy of the forest. Arboretum Borealis, a lifeline of the planet.
And the Little Global Forest, that's a prayer book, you know, a prayer book of the forest. Christian is my editor and photographer.
There's this one is just for a joke.
Yeah. We've been working on the forest for a very long time now, with the idea of peace in our heart, haven't we? For an awfully long time.
Yes, we have.
An intact forest is a mighty act of peace.
And it's fundamental to who we are and to what we do.
Christian's father has had a great influence on our thinking. His job was to oversee the safe return of the Apollo astronauts from the moon. So through their eyes, he saw the Earth from a very different vantage point.
Your father made an interesting comment to us once. Do you remember that comment? And it was about the astronauts when they came back from space.
Well, he said that when the astronauts go into space and then view the world and then come back, they fundamentally change the way they look at the world.
We're carrying his message. We're carrying the message of man being on the moon and seeing how fragile and how small Earth is. It is a very fragile, closed system.
And if we don't treat it right, it'll get rid of us.
It will get rid of us, yeah.
I imagine you've never really thought about the atmosphere as being clean, unless of course you live downtown in a city or you live in Beijing, China, where the atmosphere is very, very bad, with a lot of particulate pollution. Trees themselves, they can clean the atmosphere. This is what all of these trees do for us on a daily basis. The forests function in absorbing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. They have been doing that for 400 million years. Trees have been banking carbon dioxide. The carbon is digested into the body of the tree from the leaf, and the oxygen floats out into the atmosphere. The real banking of nature is carbon banking. It is the one element that is used and reused and vaulted and banked and stock shared all over the planet. Even in you. There is carbon found in every part of every living system all over the world. And the trees are the facilitators for this. The forests are the great banks of nature, a carbon flow that is extraordinary.
All over the world, we've taken down too much forest. In some instances, what's gone up are non-native trees into native spaces. Monoculture.
For example, here in Ireland, you'll see great plantations, well, let's call it plantations, because they're not really forests. It's of Sitka spruce. They're the green evergreens you see as you drive around the coastlands and right through the country. The problem is that Sitka spruce comes from the west coast of Canada and the United States.
They've been brought here for cheap and easy lumber. Like barley or corn, the tree plantation is a cash crop. It's not the heart and bones of a rich ecosystem that turns a group of trees into a forest. For that, we must look to the remains of the ancient native woodlands.
We don't have much native forest here at all in terms of hardwoods. We have a huge increase in commercial tree farming all over the world, of plantations of monocultures that are usually exotic trees that are not adapted to local conditions. They're deserts. They're not providing for biodiversity. Again, we need to emphasize why are the native trees and natural forests so important. It's because they're adapted to the place. Extremely customized. We forget that this planet was a rock a long time ago, and it was through plants and eventually trees that the soil humus was created and built up. And with the major loss of soil, with the clear felling of forests in uplands all over the world, causing major flooding problems, erosion. The loss of natural forest has led to major infertility. So it's important again that communities can protect themselves and their soil by creating their own local community, mixed native woodlands.
Native species are always value added. This is the Scots pine. It has been planted in North America, throughout North America, and it's an invasive species there. But in all of Europe, up to the boreal forest, including Russia, this tree is the king of the forest. These seeds are edible, and this area is full of birds. And they'll plunge in here, and they'll take their food from this supermarket. The supermarket of this tree holds a fatty acid, a linolenic kind of acid that builds their brains and it builds their babies.
Why does Ireland now not plant this native species?
Or supply the supermarket for all of the migrations of birds. And let us not forget all of the butterflies and the insects.
Where you have native species, you have biodiversity.
If you've got biodiversity, you have health. Standing here at the foot of a native species, the Scots pine, Pinus sylvestris to you all.
Fairy tales are filled with enchanted forests, places of danger and transformation, home to witches and fairies. But few forests evoke enchantment more than the Black Forest of Germany. Like Ireland, German culture is deeply rooted in the forest. Germany has managed to remain more than 30% forest covered. Germany is a highly industrialized nation, yet for them, sustainable resource management is a way of life. In 2013, Germany celebrated 300 years of sustainable forest management.
We have 50% needle trees and we have 50% leaf trees. And the half of all the leaf trees is the beech tree. We are looking forward that we don't have stands with only one tree, no monoculture. In Germany, it's very important where you get the drinking water. And the forests are a very important area for clean water. And we don't get compensation for this, but we do this for our people and for all of our wellness also. And we have a discussion in whether there must be a change that the forest owner should get money also for this, get a grant for this job he does, for example, for drinking water, for good air. We have very much people on this area, and so we have also a lot of emissions, and the forests are important to absorb the emissions.
We are thinking in very, very long time schedules when we think about forests. I mean, we inherited the forest from our grandfathers, and we are benefiting from it now. That we consider it our duty to leave the quality or to leave the possibilities for the next generation to do just the same as we do today. That's our understanding of sustainability.
When I was a young girl in Ireland, there seemed to be no end to everything. And I remember being told that the hair on a person's head, you couldn't count their hairs, it was endless. And the same kind of thinking was applied to the freshwater lakes and the fish in the sea. There was no end to the fish and the trawling that could take place, and the forest could come down everywhere. There was such a richness on this planet that there was no end to it. The same goes for mining. Ores of all kind could be taken out of the earth, and there was no end to them. But today, it is not infinite. It is finite. There is an end to the forest. There is an end to the great ocean, the saline ocean, the fish in the sea. There is an end to mining. There is an end to all of these things. We have to manage our resources sustainably.
This is one forest in need of preservation, not restoration. It is the largest forest system in the world. It is holding its breath. And all we need do is preserve it.
The boreal is the last great working forest in the world. It is about 30,000 years old. This forest system feeds the big and the small. Caribou, bears, deer, wolves and wolverines, beaver and snow leopards, down to the minute mammals, just to name a few. It is the breadbasket for migration and nesting for many of the planet's songbirds and waterfowl. The boreal entombs a vast tonnage of cold carbon storage in the permafrost of the ground and waterways. In order to survive its 7-month harsh winter, with short days and reduced sunlight, the boreal has evolved over time into a complex web of cold-hardy species, each dependent on all the others for its survival. That's why I call the boreal forest the mastermind of the world.
Lots of people are aware and know of the Amazon,
But the planet holds this giant secret to the north.
The boreal sits upon the north of the globe like a crown, right across northern Canada and Scandinavia, and then across into Russia, where it is known as the taiga. It even touches northern Asia and Hokkaido, the most northern island of Japan, and into the Kuril Islands. The boreal accounts for 30% of the global forests.
In Canada, the backbone of that forest holds a pine tree called the jack pine, or the Pinus banksiana. They are lean and frugal, these trees. They're conifers, remember. They hang on to the needles for up to 7 years.
So it means their pull of nutrients out of the soil isn't very great. They can survive in very tough conditions.
There is a secondary forest of lichens, which covers the forest floor as a carpet and surfaces the trees. These lichens clean the atmosphere and pull nitrogen out of it.
And the forest lays down needles over vast periods of time, and those needles don't decompose, but they're a source of protein for the lichens, which take about 100 years to grow. Then there are the tripe lichens on rocks, and they take more than 100 years to grow. And then there are the bryonia lichens on all the trees, just lacing the trees. And they take an awfully long time to grow.
Its remote northern location has largely saved the boreal from the fate of the southern forests. But the age of megaprojects is rapidly changing that. In the boreal forest of northern Alberta, Canada, are the tar sands. A resource extraction project of immense proportions, with plans to expand over an area almost twice the size of Ireland.
This once living landscape is now dead. Giant hydroelectric projects are flooding on a similar scale. Then mining and logging. In all of the forests all over the world, there are trees that represent a biomass of about 300 billion tons of carbon dioxide, about a quarter to a third of it in and under the boreal.
If the boreal forest comes down, we are looking at the release of an enormous tonnage of carbon dioxide into the air. Enough carbon dioxide into the air that it will make it toxic for us. You see, you can't replace or replant that boreal forest.
You can never replace this complexity. Once it's gone, it's gone.
In the heart of North America, bordering the east shore of Lake Winnipeg, is Pimatuan-Aki, similar in size to the country of Denmark. It holds a forest growing to its full potential. And it is by no accident this forest remains pristine. The Aboriginal people have fought to keep this land untouched. If the voices of its people are heard, it will become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Aboriginal peoples have been guardians of this land for thousands of years. Sofia Rabliauskas from the Ojibwe Nation has spent her life in the Poplar River area in the heart of Manitoba's boreal forest.
For somebody to come in and say to you, well, we're going to cut all your trees, we're going to log this area, well, it's going to destroy your health first and destroy your families. It will be...
It's a threat. Even
It's a
just to
threat.
say, you know, we're going to do that. This is our plan, and it's a threat. It was a threat to our way of life.
It must be very scary.
And it is, and that's why we took it upon ourselves that we're not going to allow this to happen. And we were very fortunate that we were able to find people who are out there to stand with us against these developments that continue to take and take and take. And that's the mentality that's out there. And I would, get people saying to me, you will continue to keep your people in poverty because you're stopping development. You're stopping community from benefiting from these projects. In the past, there were all these developments going on near indigenous communities, and none of those indigenous communities ever benefited from these projects or gained. Those people continue to live in poverty. Those people continue to have their resources extracted from their lands. So the idea came that maybe we should do a land use planning, how the land is continuing to be used to this day.
To help in the protection of their land, 5 Anishinaabe Ojibwe First Nation territories, provincial and federal governments have all come together to propose Pimatuan Aki, the land that gives life, as a designated UNESCO World Heritage Site, to ensure mindful protection of both their culture and of these lands into the future.
They realized the land is most valuable to everyone, left as it is, with the trees growing in the earth.
We have been able to maintain that land for thousands of years, the way it is, untouched by development, pristine boreal forest, healthy ecosystem. When I was walking through the bush with my father, and when he said, don't forget to stop and look around you and feel the earth around you, the beauty. So each generation has its responsibility.
What do you say?
Be grounded. Don't lose that. That's the wisdom of that land. It reminds you of who you are. Once you connect to that land, you will do anything to fight for it.
We look around us here, we've got how many thousands and thousands of tons of material in this oak wood. Where has it come from? It hasn't quarried from it, it hasn't taken from anything.
Yeah, it's taken
It's
from the
taken from the
atmosphere.
air,
Yep.
it's taken from the water and the sun. And it's created this wealth. The earth needs over 1/3 cover, forest cover, and more to have a balance and to ensure fertility of soil
And oxygenation
and
of the air.
oxygenation of the air.
Yeah.
So we can't wait for organisations, we can't
No.
wait for politicians. It's not rocket science to put the forest back. Communities could be trained to engage in the restoration, in collecting the seed, creating the nurseries. There's plenty of work to be done restoring the forest.
Yeah.
Once you connect with that land, you will do anything to fight for it.
Bioplan for biodiversity. Bioplan will reverse pollution.
今日は特許本来の木のたった22種類を2000本植えていただきます。じゃあ3人一緒に赤石
赤石
ダイナさん please this is Japanese Latin name is Peltigularca evergreen
Evergreen, yeah, evergreen species.
Arakashi
Arakashi.
どうぞ
Arakashi.
One more
Arakashi.
ありがとうございましたはいありがとうございましたじゃあ愛子さんはい
シイノキ
ありがとうございましたじゃあ
Didn't want to damage them.
At times, and long ago, I saw, touched, and heard that which was being born. A heartbeat, a sound amongst the stones, was that which was being born.